Hey guys, this is James here from TDB, bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today is going to be a drinking Inbetweenisode, and I have a special tea that I'm going to bringing on. So thank you to Tim and Mike again for sending these samples. As those of you that follow regularly will know, I brought on a 7542 recently from 2005, so I'm going to be bringing a couple more on. This one is from 2001, Menghai Tea Factory. It's the traditional Yun 7542 that refers to the characters on this. For those of you not familiar, there's a lot of different versions of 7542, especially when you get into like this era. And the prices can vary. I did look these up beforehand. I believe the traditional Yun is a little bit of the less expensive one. I think it's about half the price actually compared to the simplified. So very much looking forward to trying both of those teas. And 7542, as I talked a little bit about in that 2005 video, is perhaps the most iconic recipe. Certainly the one that is you're going to see kind of the name, and it comes with a lot of just expectation and baggage depending on what you're looking after. And it's just very much known as a very punchy recipe. 2005, the production had started to ramp up. So 2001 is interesting and a very different year from 2001 in a lot of respects. If you ever have the opportunity to try pre-2004 dye that's legitimate, you should always be very eager and say yes please to those opportunities, because tea was just not produced at the scale it was just a few years later down the line. So even in the span of just 4 years, 2001 to 2005, a lot changed within the pu'er industry and within dye itself. So we're looking at a pretty darn different era of raw pu'er, or at least in kind of that transitory period here. And so, these teas, I don't know what they paid or if it was like a sample or something like that, but certainly a treat to try. So I only have one session, so I did not pre-screen this as I do for normal teas, but I still think it's probably going to be worth talking about. Another interesting thing worth mentioning too is very much in kind of this transitory time, you would also, the storage norms were changing quite a bit too, quite drastically. The dry storage would eventually become far more dominant than it was like earlier, like in the 90s and stuff like that. So much so that we'd expect teas kind of in this early 2000s, 1990s era to have undergone a little bit more humid storage, whereas tea from 2005, it very well might have too, but you have to ask those questions, and there is a greater likelihood you could be having something dry storage. As I talked a little bit about last time, my preference for these 7542s, if I'm going to drink them in this kind of like semi-aged period, is for them to have been hit a little bit more with humidity and stuff like that. The pure dry storage is certainly very interesting, but as far as like generating a tea that's very smooth and goes down very easily, I think the speed test and the drinkability test for me tends to gravitate a little bit more towards just a bit of humidity here. And judging from the smell here, I do think that's what we are basically in store for. So I know this is Taiwan storage, and it smells like it has seen, it's fairly moderate as far as that goes. You certainly get some earthy notes and some deeper notes than I think I got for that 2005 version. Alright, so here we go. This is steep number 3. I have steep number 2 in the cup. So it has just a really nice, very clear kind of red liqueur here. So very beautiful. Take a smell. So a little bit of spicy, herbal, Chinese sort of medicine notes in there, heavy on the wood. Cheers, guys. Slightly sour, but the amount of punch, which I would include kind of bitterness and sourness sort of in that collective category, and astringency, sort of like that drying you're getting, is significantly less. So much so that I think this easily could be a very drinkable tea right now. Would this tea improve with age? Probably. But I think that equation is quite a bit different than something like the 2005 7542, which I had in a recent episode. Cheers. Yeah, I think this is falling into a category of tea that Denny would definitely have really enjoyed. So yeah, really kind of foresty, woody notes coming out here. I'm trying to think of how this would compare with an 8582. I feel like an 8582 just has a little bit more broadness to it, and is a little bigger in the body, and certainly less of those sharper notes. So more of those like. So this one I feel like still maintains kind of the sharp woodiness to it. You can tell it was quite strong at the time. It still is decently bitter for a tea that's like 22 years old. But the bitterness has mellowed from something like what we'd expect from the 2005 version of this tea. Yeah, I would say the storage is quite on point overall. It's a little hard to say how much more humidity this has had than the 2005. I would guess sheerly from the year that those extra 4 years were fairly humid ones. But I can't say with any certainty that that's the case. And it's interesting. You can really feel that those notes that made me not want to drink the 2005 have started to really turn that corner for this tea. Yeah, really nice sweetness kind of coating in the mouth. It hints at a little bit of that menthol and stuff that is a little bit more predominant in something like a Shaguan 8653, but so it has a little bit of that going on, but it's not quite full blown as you would get for something like a Shaguan. I would say this is pretty consistent, steep in, steep out, sort of like the Menghai Tea Factory 2005 7542 was. Does this tea blow me away? Not necessarily. I do think the value proposition for any 7542 of kind of like origin here, if you're just looking at it as like a tea to drink, is a little dubious, but they're nonetheless a good tea and a good tea to try, and probably a very important reference tea. Too. I mean, I think trying this in contrast with the 2005 is very interesting. I don't think I've ever had a tea that's like purely dry stored, 7542 from like early 2000s. I have had a couple earlier dry stored 7542s that are probably even greener than this one, even though they are older. Nice nose there. A little bit of kind of florals coming out there too. Not very fruity. That's one thing that it's not. Cheers. Yeah, I would say this tea is still more woody than earthy. I'd say it has significantly more earthy notes than the 2005 version I had, which is probably a product of both the age as well as a little bit more strong storage early on, perhaps a little bit of traditional. But still very strong. Yeah, I mean, these 7542s, I do see how on a certain day that they would not hit me in the right way, just because there's a certain punchiness to this that just is very, just kind of runs its way all the way through the tea, in a way that, you know, I can sometimes really dig that, and other times it's not what I'm looking for in that particular day. All right, well, I think that just about wraps up this Inbetweenisode. I'm going to give this a 7.0 rating. Very solid tea overall. I think it's nice to drink, has a good characteristic. This is definitely in the zone of teas that, if you disregard cost and all that stuff, I would 100% be okay drinking on the regular. Is it strong? Is it still strong? Yes. But yeah, I think it's at that phase where it is starting to drink. It's getting a little bit of like sweetness and salivation going on here. Very nice. Okay, well, thank you again to Tim and Mike for sending this tea. And I will see you guys next time, and look forward to the simplified Yun, which I will be filming tomorrow, and you'll probably see in a week or so. Cheers.